Zekthera stood before the High Council, his dark blue skin showing scars from battles across 17 star systems. His three eyes focused on the ancient beings who ruled the Kalari Empire. The council chamber was silent, waiting for his words. Every warrior in the hall knew that Zekthera had survived something terrible. They could see it in the way his hands shook when he thought no one was looking. "Honored Council," Zekthera began, his voice steady despite the memories flooding. "Back. I must tell you about the humans. I must warn you about what we found on the third planet of the Sol system." The eldest council member leaned forward. "Speak, warrior. Tell us of this defeat." Zekthera's mind went back to that day 6 months ago. The Kalari fleet had been magnificent as they approached the blue and green world. 200 ships, each one capable of destroying a city. War Commander Vexenol had been confident. Why shouldn't he be? The Kalari had conquered the peaceful Centauri in 3 days. The Rigel colonies had surrendered after seeing just one Kalari battleship. "The planet looked easy," Zekthera said. "Our scouts reported a young species. They had barely reached their own moon. They fought each other constantly over small pieces of land and simple resources. We thought they would be like all the others." He remembered the briefing. The humans had primitive weapons that used chemical explosives. Their fastest ships couldn't even leave their own star system. Intelligence reports showed them divided into hundreds of separate groups, always fighting each other. Perfect targets. For conquest, War Commander Vexenol ordered the first wave at dawn. Zekthera continued. "I was leading Fighter Squadron 7. Our target was a large human city they called New York. The plan was simple. Show our power, destroy some buildings. Wait for their surrender." The first sign something was wrong came when they entered the atmosphere. Zekthera had expected chaos, panic, maybe some scattered resistance. Instead, human military forces were already moving. Fighter jets rose to meet them, guided by ground controllers who seemed to know exactly where the Kalari ships would appear. Their weapons were weak, Zekthera admitted, but they used them in ways we never expected. A human pilot named Jake Morrison led a squadron of their fighters. His missiles couldn't penetrate our shields, so he flew his aircraft directly into our ships. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Suicide attacks were known to the Kalari, but only as last desperate acts by defeated enemies. These humans had used them as opening moves. "Morrison's aircraft exploded against my wing leader's ship," Zekthera said. "Both died instantly. But his wingman, a pilot called Steve Rogers, saw what happened and immediately did the same thing." Then another. They were coordinating these attacks like they were normal battle tactics. On the ground, things were even stranger. Lieutenant Lisa Grant had organized human missile defenses faster than Kalari computers predicted was possible. She wasn't just firing at random, she was targeting landing ships with deadly accuracy. When the Kalari adapted their approach patterns, she adapted her targeting. It was like fighting an enemy that learned from every mistake in real time. "The humans didn't try to negotiate," Zekthera explained. "They didn't broadcast surrender. Offers, they didn't even ask what we wanted. They just started fighting harder." Captain Ryan Burke had been flying an ancient human fighter when Kalari plasma damaged his engine. Instead of ejecting to safety, he had aimed his burning aircraft at a Kalari command ship hovering over a human medical facility. The explosion destroyed the ship and saved hundreds of human civilians below.
"Oh."
"Burke could have lived," Zekthera said quietly. "He chose to die to protect others." This was not desperation. This was strategy. The most disturbing part was how quickly the humans adapted. Within hours, they were using captured Kalari equipment. Commercial aircraft became improvised. Bombers. Civilian vehicles were turned into mobile weapon platforms. Construction equipment was modified to attack Kalari ground forces. War Commander Vexenol had expected the first day to end with human leaders begging for mercy. Instead, human forces launched coordinated attacks on 17 different fronts. Simultaneously, they used their own communication satellites to coordinate strikes across their entire planet. "They treated our invasion like a learning experience," Zekthera said. "Every time we used a new weapon, they found a counterattack. Every time we changed tactics, they changed faster. The worst moment came when Captain Danny Walsh led a group of human soldiers in an assault on a landed Kalari transport. These humans had no powered armor, no energy weapons, no advanced technology. They used explosive devices strapped to their own bodies to destroy Kalari equipment worth more than their entire civilization. Walsh and his team knew they would die, Zekthara told the council. They planned to die. They wanted to die, if it meant taking Kalari ships with them. By the end of the first day, Kalari forces had taken heavy casualties and controlled almost no territory. The humans had turned their entire planet into a battlefield. Old human males and females were making weapons in hidden factories. Children were carrying messages between resistance groups. Even their wounded continued fighting from medical facilities. I shot down a human aircraft over their city, Zekthara remembered. The pilot, a female named Karen Mitchell, ejected. Safely, I thought she would surrender. Instead, she used her emergency radio to guide other human fighters to my position. She helped them kill me because destroying my ship was more important to her than her own life. Zekthara had barely escaped that encounter. Mitchell had died in the bombing that followed, but her sacrifice had cost the Kalari 3 more fighters. The first day was supposed to be easy, Zekthara concluded. We were supposed to demonstrate our power and accept their surrender. Instead, we learned that humans don't surrender. They escalate. The council chamber remained silent. Every member understood what this meant. The Kalari Empire had built its power on the assumption that overwhelming force would bring quick victory. The humans had proved that assumption wrong. What happened next? The eldest council member asked. Zekthara's 3 eyes closed briefly. Next, Honored One. We learned that the first day was just the beginning. The humans were just getting started. The implications hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. For the first time in Kalari history, they had met an enemy that treated total war as a natural state of existence. The High Council waited as Zekthara gathered his thoughts. His hands still trembled when he remembered the weeks that followed the first day. What the Kalari had thought was desperate resistance became something far worse. It became organized. The second week changed everything, Zekthara said. We expected the humans to weaken as their supplies ran out. Instead, they got stronger. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been working in a human research facility when the invasion began. While Kalari forces fought in the streets above, she led teams of human scientists in underground laboratories. They were studying pieces of crashed Kalari ships. Within 10 days, they understood how Kalari power systems worked. Rodriguez and her team didn't just copy our technology, Zekthara explained. They improved it. They made our own weapons work better than we could. General Tony Marshall had taken command of human military forces across their largest continent. Marshall did something no Kalari commander had ever seen: coordinated armies from different human nations who had been enemies just weeks before. Traditional human rivals worked together like they had been allies for centuries. The transformation was terrifying to watch. Captain Neil Foster organized ordinary human civilians into fighting units more effective than trained Kalari soldiers. These humans had no military experience, but Foster taught them to use Kalari weaknesses against them. Factory workers became saboteurs. Teachers became intelligence gatherers. Children became message carriers who could move through battle zones unseen. Foster turned their entire population into an army, Zekthara said. Every human became a potential threat. Maria Santos had been building human transportation vehicles before the invasion. When the fighting started, she helped convert automobile factories into weapons manufacturing plants. The humans took their industrial knowledge and applied it to war production. Within 3 weeks, they were building weapons designed specifically to kill Kalari soldiers. Santos created weapons we had never seen before, Zekthara told the council. They were crude but effective. Worse, they were designed by people who understood how we fought. The Battle of Denver showed how completely the humans had changed their approach. Commander Amy Johnson led a tank division that had been equipped with captured Kalari energy weapons. Johnson didn't use them like Kalari would. She used them like a human. Kalari battle tactics relied on overwhelming firepower and direct assault. Johnson's tanks would appear, fire a few shots, then disappear before Kalari forces could respond. When Kalari ships pursued, they found themselves in carefully prepared ambushes. Johnson was fighting like she was hunting dangerous animals, not conducting a military campaign. Johnson's tactics made no sense to our computers, Zekthara said. She would retreat when she could win. She would attack when she should run. But every decision worked. The humans were learning faster than the Kalari could adapt. Every Kalari weapon that fell into human hands was studied, understood, and improved. Within days, human engineers like Dr. Kevin Murphy were creating versions of Kalari. Technology that somehow worked better than the originals. Murphy had been studying human psychology before the war. Now, he was using that knowledge to understand Kalari psychology. He broadcast messages that exploited Kalari cultural fears. He used Kalari religious beliefs against them, made Kalari soldiers afraid of their own shadows. Murphy got inside our heads, Zekthar admitted. He made us doubt ourselves. The most disturbing discovery came when the humans revealed their history. Colonel Janet Pierce had been studying something humans called military history. She explained to captured Kalari soldiers that humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years. They had refined warfare into an art form. Pierce showed Kalari prisoners records of human conflicts, wars involving millions of soldiers, battles lasting years, entire human civilizations destroyed and rebuilt through warfare. The Kalari learned that what they considered extreme tactics were normal for humans. Pierce told us that humans had been preparing for our invasion for generations, Zekthara said. They had imagined fighting aliens in their stories and entertainment. They had already planned how to defeat us before we arrived. Professor Carl Bennett had spent his life writing about alien invasions. His fictional stories became real battle plans. Military strategist Colonel Janet Pierce implemented defense strategies based on scenarios that human imagination had already explored. The humans had been mentally rehearsing this war for decades. Intelligence officer Susan Wright coordinated information gathering that revealed Kalari tactical patterns within weeks. Wright had studied Kalari behavior like a scientist studying laboratory animals. She knew how Kalari commanders would react to different situations before they did. Wright predicted our moves 3 steps ahead, Zekthara said. She turned our predictability into our weakness. The siege of London lasted 3 months and became a nightmare for Kalari forces. Admiral Patricia Blake commanded human naval forces that had been converted into mobile weapons platforms. Blake's ships moved like schools of fish, coordinating attacks that confused Kalari tracking systems. But the worst part was learning about human military culture. Sergeant Bobby Clark, a human military historian, broadcast communications that explained human warfare to Kalari forces. The Kalari learned that humans had fought 2 global wars in their recent history. Wars that involved hundreds of millions of casualties. Clark told us that human wars made our conquests look like children's games, Zekthara said. Humans had been fighting wars of total destruction against their own species. The humans had survived conflicts that would have ended most civilizations. They had rebuilt their world multiple times after destroying it themselves. They understood warfare not as conquest but as survival. For humans, total war was just another tool for solving problems. Dr. Nancy Foster had been developing human space technology before the invasion. Now, she was adapting Kalaria ships for human use. Foster's modifications made Kalaria vessels more efficient and more deadly. She was preparing humans for space warfare using captured technology. Foster was getting ready to bring human warfare to our worlds, Zekthara said quietly. Captain Dale Robinson led the first human mission beyond their planet using stolen Kalari ships. Robinson's team didn't just escape Earth's gravity. They began attacking Kalari supply lines between stars. Humans were taking their war beyond their own world. Robinson proved that humans could fight in space as well as on their planet, Zekthara told the Council. They were becoming a threat to the entire Kalari Empire. The Council members looked at each other with growing alarm. This was not a report about defeating primitives. This was a warning about something unprecedented in galactic history. What happened when they reached space? The eldest council member, asked Zekthra's voice, dropped to almost a whisper. That honored one is when we learned what humans really were. Zekthara's voice grew darker as he continued his testimony. The High Council could see the fear in his eyes now. What he was about to tell them would change how the Kalari Empire viewed warfare forever. The third month was when we understood what humans really were, Zekthara said. We thought we were fighting a primitive species learning to defend itself. We were wrong. We were fighting a species that had perfected warfare over thousands of years. The siege of London had dragged on longer than any Kalari campaign in history. Admiral Patricia Blake commanded human naval forces from ships that moved like living creatures through the water. Her vessels coordinated attacks with a precision that seemed impossible for such primitive technology. But it was what the humans did during the siege that revealed their true nature. Dr. Kevin Murphy had been broadcasting psychological warfare, messages that targeted specific Kalari fears. Murphy didn't just understand alien psychology, he was reshaping it. Murphy made our soldiers afraid to sleep, Zekthara explained. He used our own religious beliefs against us, turned our strength into weakness, using only words. The humans had studied every piece of Kalari equipment they captured. Intelligence Officer Susan Wright led teams that analyzed Kalari tactical patterns with frightening accuracy. Wright could predict how Kalari commanders would respond to any situation. She was reading Kalari minds like they were simple books. Wright knew what we would do before we decided to do it, Zekthar said. She turned our training against us. The breakthrough came when the humans revealed their historical records. Sergeant Bobby Clark, a military historian, broadcast detailed accounts of human warfare to Kalari forces. What the Kalari learned horrified them beyond imagination. Humans had fought wars involving entire continents. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their own planet. They had survived conflicts that killed millions of their own people, and then rebuilt their civilization to fight again. Clark showed us records of something called World War II, Zekthara said quietly. 60 million humans died in 6 years. The survivors rebuilt their world and prepared for the next war. The Kalari had conquered 17 star systems, but they had never fought a war of total extinction. Humans had fought such wars against themselves, and won by becoming stronger than their enemies through sheer determination to survive. Captain Dale Robinson had led the first human space missions using captured Kalari technology.
Ships
Didn't just escape Earth's atmosphere. They began hunting Kalari vessels in deep space using tactics no alien species had ever seen. Robinson turned space into a hunting ground, Zekthara said. His ships moved like predators stalking prey. Dr. Nancy Foster had been improving Kalari technology since the invasion began. Foster's modifications made human ships faster and more deadly than original Kalari designs. She was creating weapons that Kalari engineers couldn't understand. Foster made our own technology obsolete, Zekthara told the council. She understood our machines better than we did. The turning point came when humans launched their counteroffensive. Captain Johnny Price led fighter squadrons that employed three-dimensional thinking the Kalari had never encountered. Prices. Pilots moved through space like they were swimming through water, attacking from angles that Kalari computers couldn't predict. Price's fighters moved like living things, Zekthara said. They didn't follow patterns. They created new patterns. Major Diana Cook coordinated human fleet movements that treated space warfare like an extension of ancient human naval tradition. Cook's ships worked together like schools of fish, supporting each other in ways that made the entire fleet stronger than its individual parts. The humans were applying thousands of years of warfare experience to technologies they had captured. Just months before, Lieutenant Randy Cohen deliberately targeted Kalari fuel depots and suicide runs that destroyed entire supply chains. Cohen's sacrifice crippled Kalari operations across 3 star systems. Cohen died to win a war that wasn't even on his planet anymore, Zekthara said. Humans were fighting for species survival. Commander Helen Baker organized ground forces that used Kalari expectations against them. Baker's soldiers would appear where Kalari sensors said no humans could survive. They used Kalari overconfidence as a weapon more deadly than any energy rifle. Baker made us afraid of our own technology, Zekthara admitted. She turned our advantages into traps. The most terrifying revelation came from analyzing human behavior patterns. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been studying Kalari psychology while improving their technology. Rodriguez understood that Kalari fought for conquest and glory. Humans fought for survival and revenge. Rodriguez explained that humans had evolved through warfare, Zekthara said. They had survived by becoming the most dangerous species on their planet. Military analyst George Watson compiled detailed reports on every Kalari weakness discovered during the conflict. Watson's analysis revealed that the Kalari Empire had fundamental flaws that made them vulnerable to human warfare tactics. Found holes in our empire that we didn't know existed, Zekthara said. He was planning to exploit them. Strategic Commander Laura Phillips was already developing plans for human expansion into Kalari territory. Phillips had studied the locations of every Kalari colony and military installation. She was preparing to bring human warfare to Kalari worlds. Phillips was ready to invade us, Zekthara said quietly. She wanted to do to our worlds what we tried to do to theirs. The final horror was learning that humans considered the invasion a learning experience. Captain Frank Miller led human forces that treated every battle like a training exercise for bigger wars. Miller's soldiers were preparing to fight enemies they hadn't met yet. Miller told captured Kalari soldiers that fighting us was just practice, Zekthara said. Humans were getting ready for wars across the galaxy. The humans had revealed their true nature through warfare. They were not a peaceful species that had been forced to fight. They were a species that had evolved through constant conflict. Warfare was not something humans learned. It was something they were born knowing. Commander Amy Johnson had explained. 2 Kalari prisoners that humans had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting predators, diseases, natural disasters, and each other. Every challenge had made them stronger. Every defeat had taught them new ways to win. Johnson said that humans were not naturally peaceful, Zekthara told the council. Peace was something they had to work for. War was their natural state. The Kalari Empire had met something unprecedented in galactic civilization, a species that treated total warfare as evolution, a species that became stronger through conflict, a species that viewed the Kalari invasion as just another step in their development as galactic predators. The humans were grateful to us, Zekthara said, his voice barely audible. We had given them an enemy worthy of their attention, the council. Chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Kalari Empire had not just failed to conquest Earth, they had awakened something that threatened every civilization in the galaxy. Zekthara looked at each council member before speaking his final words. His voice carried the weight of absolute defeat and growing terror. What he was about to tell them would change the future of the Kalari Empire forever. 18 months. After the invasion began, we had lost 60% of our forces, Zekthara said. We had gained nothing. The humans had taken everything from us and were preparing to take more. The final phase of the war had been a complete reversal of everything the Kalari expected. Commander Frank Miller was leading human interstellar missions using fully converted Kalari technology. Miller's ships were not just copies of Kalari vessels. They were improvements that made original Kalari designs look primitive. Dr. Nancy Foster had spent months perfecting human versions of Kalari weapons. Foster's energy rifles were more accurate than Kalari originals. Her power systems lasted longer. Her armor was lighter, but stronger. The humans had taken Kalari technology and made it better in every way. Foster's improvements made our own weapons obsolete, Zekthara told the council. She understood our science better than our own engineers. Captain Johnny Price had become legendary among human pilots for his space combat tactics. Price treated three-dimensional space warfare like humans had treated ancient aerial combat. His fighters moved in patterns that confused Kalari tracking systems and destroyed entire squadrons. Price's pilots fought like they had been born in space, Zekthara said. They moved like space was their natural environment. Major Diana Cook commanded human fleets that used naval traditions thousands of years old, adapted for space warfare. Cook's ships supported each other like ancient human warships, creating formations that were both beautiful and deadly. The humans had done something impossible. They had taken warfare traditions from their planet's oceans and made them work between stars. Cook's fleets moved like living creatures through space, hunting Kalari ships with patience and precision. Cook turned space into an ocean where humans were the apex predators, Zekthara explained. But the final terror came when human leaders made contact with the Kalari High Command. President Chris Hamilton had sent a message directly to the Kalari homeworld. The message was simple and absolutely terrifying in its implications. Hamilton's message was not a plea for peace. It was not a negotiation offer. It was an ultimatum delivered with the calm confidence of a species that had already won. Hamilton told us to leave human space completely, Zekthara said quietly. He said if we didn't, humans would bring their version of warfare to every Kalari world. The humans had learned the Kalari language perfectly. They had studied Kalari culture and religion. They had identified the location of every Kalari colony and the Kalari homeworld itself. Military analyst George Watson had compiled detailed intelligence on Kalari weaknesses that could be exploited. Watson knew more about our empire than most Kalari citizens, Zekthara admitted. He had mapped every vulnerability. Strategic Commander Laura Phillips was already developing plans for human expansion into Kalari space. Phillips had studied the locations of Kalari military installations, trade routes, and population centers. She was preparing for systematic conquest. Phillips was planning to do to our entire empire what we tried to do to their one planet, Zekthara said. The most disturbing part of Hamilton's message was the revelation that humans considered the invasion a learning experience. The president thanked the Kalari for teaching humans about galactic warfare and alien technology. The invasion had been like a university course for human military development. Captain Dale Robinson had used captured Kalari ships to scout Kalari colonies in nearby star systems. Robinson's reconnaissance missions revealed that most Kalari worlds were unprepared for the type of warfare humans specialized in. Robinson found that our colonies were defenseless against human tactics, Zekthara said. We had never planned to defend against an enemy like humans. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had continued improving Kalari technology throughout the conflict. Rodriguez's final innovations created human weapons that could penetrate any Kalari defense. She had turned 18 months of warfare into a complete technological revolution. Rodriguez made humans more advanced than us, using our own technology, Ekthata told the council. The humans had revealed something that terrified every Kalari commander. They had enjoyed the war. Lieutenant Randy Cohen had died, destroying Kalari. Fuel depots, but he had smiled as he flew his suicide mission. Commander Helen Baker had organized ground forces that celebrated each victory like they were playing games. The humans fought like warfare was entertainment, Zekthara said. They found joy in defeating us. Intelligence officer Susan Wright had compiled psychological profiles of every Kalari commander. Wright understood Kalari military thinking better than the Kalari themselves. She could predict Kalari strategies and counter them before they were implemented. Wright made our own tactics useless, Zekthara said. She turned our training into predictable patterns. The final message from Hamilton included detailed plans for human expansion across the galaxy. The humans were not content to defend their homeworld. They wanted to explore, colonize, and if necessary, conquer other star systems. Hamilton showed us maps of human expansion plans, Zekthara said quietly. They included our territory. Dr. Kevin Murphy had spent the final months of the war studying other alien species mentioned in Kalari records. Murphy was preparing psychological warfare techniques that could be used against any species humans encountered in their galactic expansion. Murphy was getting ready to fight aliens we hadn't even met yet, Zekthara said. The war had ended not with human surrender, but with Kalari retreat. War Commander Vexenol had ordered complete withdrawal from human space after receiving Hamilton's ultimatum. The Kalari Empire, conquerors of 17 star systems, had been defeated by a species that had never left their own planet before the invasion. We retreated because we finally understood what humans were, Zekthara said. They were not a species that fought wars. They were a species that had made warfare into evolution. Zekthara's final words to the High Council carried the weight of absolute certainty. The humans were coming. Not today, Not tomorrow, but eventually. They would spread across the galaxy like a force of nature, and any species that challenged them would face the same nightmare the Kalari had experienced. Honored Council, Zekthera concluded, I recommend that we classify human space as forbidden territory. We must warn every allied species that humanity represents something unprecedented in galactic civilization. He paused, looking at each council member with eyes that had seen the future of galactic warfare. Humans are a species that has made warfare into an art form. They've spent thousands of years perfecting it against themselves. Now they are ready to practice it on the rest of the galaxy. The council chamber remained silent as Zekthara's warning echoed through the hall. The Kalari Empire had learned that some battles should never be fought, and some enemies should never be awakened. The humans were awake now, and the galaxy would never be the same.